Alright, we left off talking about curves, basically to talk about the new keyframing class, or the refurbished keyframing class, and how we used it in the creating the new gradient stop class. So let's just start fresh now, um, and let's talk about gradients for a second. For one thing, there is a slightly cosmetically updated gradient tool. As you can see, there's like highlights now when you mouse over each thing. No longer do we have the bow and arrow metaphor for gradient stops. I figure people have been using computers long enough that they don't need a metaphor anymore. On the other hand, the kids these days, they don't seem to understand when a tool has a panel associated with it, where you go to a panel to change settings. They just want, say for example, as an example, the crop tool. They just want to go on screen, move things around, click little buttons and stuff. They don't understand that you have to go from here onto some panel somewhere and change some setting in a text panel. They just, well, why isn't everything I need right here on screen? The same with the gradient tool. That's the way our gradient tool really should operate. You shouldn't have to go to a panel to make all these changes. I mean, why would you do that? That's like old-fashioned thinking. Why can't you just have a tool on screen where you select the linear tool, and you go here, and instead of just drawing that, you'd have like a little line on screen, and each little gradient stop would be like there on the line, and you can manipulate it right there on screen. That's really the way it should be. If you want to talk about a modern interface, you shouldn't have to go to some panel, search around for some panel somewhere, and I move this, and then somewhere down the line it changes the thing on screen. That's the kids aren't going to get that these days. So to support that idea, we've added a new what did I just say? A new gradient stop class to the API. As you can see, we've taken and rendered some gradient, some different colors in a gradient, and we've made it so it can render linearly in just like pretty much what Howler does. But the gag here is this is all programmable. Previously in Howler, gradients always existed as a lookup table, and what this does is it takes the gradient stops and stores them in a class. It moves the generation of the lookup table all the way to the end of the process until you're about ready to render the thing. That way you can manipulate everything as a gradient stop and not have to worry about lookup tables until you're ready to render. This is going to make it easier to add tools where we have more interactivity. So as you can see, this is working. This is basically a proof of concept. We don't have all those little gradient stops in there just yet, but I'll show you how you can program these things. Oops. Yeah, here we are. Gradient stops, linear gradient, and okay. Here is the code. Let's see. We basically create a new color object, and we create a new gradient object. G is for gradient object, C is for color object. So we start with C, and we for each color component we set a value, or we could optionally do C dot set color, and well, give it another basically give it another VB color or something to that effect. But it's easy enough to set the RGB values. And then we just go to the G, that's that gradient stop object, and say add stop. This lerp might be hard to explain, so let me just hard code something. We'd say lerp and 0 and C. C is that color, 0 is the time. As you can say here, the parameters for add stop is time and C for color. So basically what we're doing is we're saying add this color to this time. Time is basically basically if I run this, time is basically from this spot to this spot. That's the time. So if this were like 500 pixels, the time would be arranged between 0 and 500. That's really all time means there. Um, Now, as I said, there's a lerp in here. Lerp means linear interpolate. So basically, if I know the length of this line, I could say like 0.2, and that'll be 20% of the length of the line. Add a stop at 20%, and add a stop at 40%, and 60%, and 80%. And that's basically what I'm doing there. And basically, once we've added all these different colors to it, you can see that last color is 255, 0255. That's magenta. Second to last was 00255. That's blue. The third to last was cyan, and then the green. And once we've added all those colors, we just say create curve. May rename that to something more intuitive. And we give it the max amount of entries we want, say 500. We know that length of that line is 500. And all we have to do there is, well, this initializes some arrays. That's just basically just storing the pixel values. If we're working in Howler, we won't need that because we'll already have our arrays. But basically, we go G, that's our gradient object, dot render linear. We give it the start and end parameters, or the start and end in pixels. That's x, y, x1, y1, x2, y2. That's the start and end. We give the width and the heights of the screen we want to render, and we send the three buffers, or the three arrays that we created there. That renders the linear gradient, and then we set the pixels back to the screen. So that's basically all there is to doing this, is setting those gradient stops and rendering it. So now that we have that programmatically available, all we have to do is create another object that lets us edit these little dots that we can move around on screen. Say we had a little dot here, a little dot here, and a little dot here. Each one has its own color. We could actually click on these, move them around, and that would modify our gradient as we work interactively there with it. So that's one thing that will probably come to Howler in the next version. Can't make any promises, but it's a possibility, and we've done the legwork at this point. Kind of interesting to see how this was implemented, by the way. Let's see. VB gradient. Let's see. This is basically the entire inner loop for rendering that linear, and this is how simple that was. Let me get rid of the comments here. And basically, this is the entire inner loop right here. These 5 lines. This eval says to evaluate what the color is at this exact pixel, and this basically sets it to the array, RGB values into the array. So basically, the only work we're actually doing is this little bit of multiplication right here, and this is what's doing all that rotation, making that linear line of gradients, and that's basically multiplying the current pixel by our matrix. And since we're only using the Y, remember the lookup table for these colors is a one-dimensional array basically, so it's just Y. We're just basically looking the Y value up in that lookup table and multiplying it by the transformation matrix, and then adding the offset. So that's it. That's all the math that's actually required to make this work. So I thought that was kind of cool. Anyway, so that kind of catches us up with where we're at on the API. Let's see if there's anything else here. Like I said, there's also some, like I said, some cosmetic changes coming. I wanted this to look more, even though we're kind of migrating away from a gradient editor in a panel, I wanted this to be more standard. So like I say, I got rid of the arrow metaphor. That was cute, but it didn't really make much sense. And this, I think, is going to be a little more standard. Plus that visual feedback makes you feel like these things are a little bit more live. You don't have to guess if it's going to do something if you click on there. And also coming, if you haven't used it yet, is under Mandelbrot, there is click on set, and there's some Julia set variations here. So some pretty cool ones too, kind of think of it. I'm going to zoom in, and it's all done on the GPU. Let's see. There we go. So just like I said, just one more thing coming to Howler, and keep an eye out for it.